Hello everybody, and today we are going to be checking out a scenario where the red team and the blue team unite. Now, if you don't know the history between these two countries, it is very complex, and them uniting has been a little bit taboo in the past, but we're going to be seeing them unite again. If you guys do enjoy today's video, then please consider liking and subscribing. Remember, we are trying to hit 100 subscribers by the end of 2025, and with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at this interesting scenario. So first of all, they're going to sign the treaty to unite. With the red team and the blue team reuniting, they are going to form what I guess would be the old empire. Not quite sure if it would be the old empire though. But with the same type of governments, I assume it would be called that. And also, of course, for this scenario to work, we're going to need the AN to not exist, because the AN has an article of which is required to enter, and it's like the Mesopotamian Accord, I think it's called, and it requires every single association of nations country to declare war on the old empire if it ever resurfaced. But if the AN does not exist in this scenario, then this can thrive on its own, and we can now look at this scenario. With all of the technical stuff out of the way, we can see what these guys would do. So first of all, there are countries on the old empire's border that are going to be very scared, such as the various nations in Anatolia. Persia and India are definitely going to have a run for their money. And the country that's probably the most frightened, I would guess, is Russia. But first, we're going to see the old empire go on the attack, and that is going to be in this Jeddah country. Old Imperial troops are going to march into the country, and this is going to actually be a little bit of a fluke in the old empire's plans. Because if you're showing the world that the old empire is always going to be militarily aggressive, then that's more likely to have a coalition formed against you. But at the moment, that is not the biggest of our concerns, so the old empire is going to go ahead and capture the capital. Modern warfare is going to end up spearing out from the front line, and we're going to see these areas link up, and the major highways of the Jeddah country, they are going to be captured, and eventually they are forced to surrender over to the old empire. So now we can take a look at this peace treaty. And in this peace treaty, we see full annexation of Jeddah. Now this is going to frighten a lot of countries because, well, one, military activity outside of the old empire's borders, that shows that it's aggressive. And two, full annexation, that means that it has ambitions that it's willing to pursue. But that's not going to happen for a little bit, as now they are going to invade the Canaanite country. Troops are going to move in from the capital area, and these areas are going to be pretty hard to capture, but the old empire is going to have a lot of an easier time over here on the Mediterranean coast. Eventually, the front lines link up, and their Mediterranean coast is captured. A separate division also comes out here to work on the Sinai Peninsula, and eventually after the south surrenders, the north is going to as well. And I don't even think I have to do a cut here because they are just going to be fully annexed and their capital goes bye-bye. Alright, and now countries are really starting to get worried, because if these guys are so aggressive, then who's to say they're not going to come after you next? So the countries around the old empire are going to start to culminate a kind of coalition of the willing part 2. But we don't have to worry about that at the moment because the old empire is going on the attack again. And that's going to be over here in the pink country, where they are not even really going to declare war, they're just going to move their troops in. But the pink team does recognize this as an act of war. So the pink team is going to declare war on the old empire, and their justification is that they declared war on us, so we're simply defending ourselves. That is preposterous, but, you know, it's the old empire, who cares? And with their main divisions being focused here in the south, we see a separate one cutting off communications in Qatar, and eventually the entire peninsula is captured, and a separate division is sent eastward to try and threaten the capital, while multiple other groups are going to start to emerge from their border. Primarily, there are 2 of them that emerge, and they are going to connect up with each other, causing a large encirclement of pink team troops who are all going to dissipate. And the front line is looking increasingly bad for the pink team, and after all of the forces here are culminated in the center to just try and spearhead up, they're actually not going to go for the capital, they just go ahead and link up with this front line. And with the west falling, we see the south is going to be cut off from the capital region, and the south falls, and eventually the capital has no choice but to surrender. So now we can take a look at this peace treaty. Alright, that was expected. Now let me get one thing clear. The old empire, if it did return, would most likely take a diplomatic path rather than a military one. But just for kind of like the sake of the entertainment of the video, we are just going to see them taking that military path. But I'm just saying that more likely they would try and branch out with their neighbors. But now we are going to see them forming a alliance. Also, once again, the AN does not exist, which means the alliance cannot be federalized. but this is going to be the square team. Also, all previous alliances that existed in WICSO do not exist here, so the square team, like all the other alliances like the South American bloc, those do not exist, so the old empire is going to form this alliance, the Square Alliance. And one country that's very quick to join that is the Farmers Union, a historically very close country to Mesopotamia, so they go ahead and join. But for now, those are the only two countries in the alliance, just the old empire and the Farmers Union. But now we can start to see India and Russia are starting to, I guess, kind of see a plan they could culminate against the old empire. Delegates and officials meet in the capital of the Indian team and in Moscow, and they are starting to develop a plan. Some people even say that China and Tibet are involved in this, and the old empire could be in trouble. Once again, they would probably take a diplomatic path, but they're not going to. Next, they're going to march their troops over to Egypt, and Egypt is immediately going to call out for help from India and Russia, but the plan to take care of the old empire is not really in full swing at the moment, so the old empire is just going to state what they want. They want the Suez Canal, and Egypt is going to have no choice but to give up the territory surrounding it. They're going to take these territories. Along with that, the Suez Canal is taken, and Egypt's economy has been severely damaged, but they did do it in trade of existing, so I don't know if it's that bad of a trade. But next, we're going to see the old empire going down to these two southern Arabian countries. Now, this is a very extreme case where the old empire is going to be very militarily active. Once again, I think I've said this like 15 times, but this is most likely not what would happen. This is purely for the entertainment of the video. But these two countries are getting a little bit of deja vu because this has happened in the past, but they're gonna go ahead and surrender. And now we can take a look at this peace treaty. Wow. Yeah, that's just about what I thought would happen. And with their ambitions in southern Arabia being complete, they can march now going against two Anatolian countries. This, of course, being the Lime Anatolian country and the Teal Anatolian country. Both of these countries, not very strong, but it is going to be a major plot point and like development for a lot of the countries around the old empire. With the full annexation of both of the nations, some countries are going to come together to try and resist the old empire. And this is a coalition that is going to be formed by India. So like the white 4-point star represents the alliance members, so it's going to be India, Russia, Greece, and finally Persia. Now these countries coming together and forming a coalition makes a lot of sense. You know, they're the pretty strong countries or countries that are not as strong and have protection from strong countries that feel threatened by the old empire's existence. But interestingly enough, the yellow team, like the beigeish northern Anatolian country, is not going to join this coalition, and that is because they have just decided that they want to accept their fate, and so subsequently they're going to unificate with the old empire. And these maroon Anatolian guys are not going to join because Greece is like their number one op. So they're going to go ahead and just, choose whether to be invaded or not from the old empire. You're eventually going to be invaded, or you can unificate, and these guys are just like, yeah, let's go out with a bang. Even if, quote, bang refers to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, apparently they're fine with that. The old empire is quickly going to take their northern Black Sea coast, and yeah, that was expected. They get absolutely pummeled, and by the looks of me erasing that capital, it does not look good for them. But now the old empire doesn't really have a set way they could go. Of course, they could go to Egypt, but that would be kind of like a not very good move because you literally just took land from them, and they're like, what's the point of taking land if you're just going to invade them? You could go to Ethiopia, but then that would probably spark war against India and Russia and that coalition, because they are the ones that established the new state of Ethiopia. So instead, they're going to add a new member to their alliance, and this one is a previous member of the Square Alliance, and that is Sudan. Sudan was an ally of the old empire up to their demise in episode 50, but with the antics in Anatolia and the coalition not serving its purpose, we're going to see the countries around the old empire, there are going to be more. Of course, more countries that join the coalition. And these are going to refer to Egypt, the Central African Republic. These guys aren't directly threatened by the old empire, but if they were to take advantage of Egypt, then they would be. And also the square teams on their border. But finally, we see Tibet joining. Tibet is a very strong, influential country, and they are not willing to let their influence be, challenged by the old empire. Because at the moment, their influence looks a little something like this. Let me just draw it up really quickly. Their influence looks a little something like this. And that's pretty scary. So Tibet is going to try and protect their sphere of influence by joining the coalition. But moving away from all the coalition stuff, we are going to see something happen between the old empire and the Caucasians. The Caucasians are actually going to ignite this little conversation that they're going to have, and it's actually going to meet in the capital of the dark green team. In the dark green team, they are going to discuss things such as closer economic ties, military ties, and possibly unification. And Russia's like, oh no, you are not going to be doing that. So, ironically enough, they are going to try and protect the Caucasians who were complying with the old empire, and they're going to invade them. The Russian troops move in swiftly and quickly, and once Caucasia gets their head out of the sand, they are going to attempt to fight back, but Russia is just overpowering them. But eventually, the front line will be stalemated between the two, and this is not because Caucasia's military might alone is enough to stand up to them. The old empire is supplying Caucasia. And of course, there are a few advances made by Russia, but old Imperial troops are going to move up the coastline, and they are going to assist in pushing back the Russians. And they are going to go as far as to actually invade into Russian territory. So now Russia is going to call back a major division from their, front line, and it is going to be called back to try and resist against this extremely large growing front line. And it's going to be so bad to the point where the entire Russian military is going to be retracted, realizing they have made a grave mistake. The coalition states two things. One, prohibit the expansion of the old empire, which they have failed to do. And two, you are allowed to use military intervention against them, but that means that they're allowed to use military intervention against you. So, this is completely legal. This is just classified as Caucasia whipping Russia's ass, and Russia is going to try and sort out the peace talks, but not before the culmination of Caucasian and Old Imperial troops are going to reach up to the Western Sea of Azov, and you will see why that is later. So now we can take a look at this peace treaty. Alright, and this is what we see our peace treaty looking like. We see the Caucasians getting this territory right here, but you might also notice that there is a silly little dark purple line, and that represents the old empire taking the Western Sea of Azov and some of the Russian coastline on the Black Sea. And this is extremely controversial, and Russia is going to be absolutely insulted by this. You know, it's right on their borders, I mean, come on. And Russia wasn't really able to prove that the old empire was involved in this, but now they're literally saying, hey, we were involved with this. But the world is pretty scared of the old empire and their capabilities, so they're eventually just going to kind of let it go. And for the first time in a while, Russia's ass has been whooped. But once again, this is going to add another wave of countries to the coalition. But before that, we see the Caucasian country immediately join the Square Alliance. But we're only going to see one country joining the 4-point star alliance, and that is going to be Ethiopia. Now, the old empire might be a little bit scared of Ethiopia, because first of all, it's, Ethiopia, I mean, they kind of whooped our asses in the Somalian Civil War and after World War III. So, them joining the coalition is not the best of things for us, but, you know, you kind of have to live with it, because you're adding the Caucasian country, who the Russians do not enjoy being in the Square Alliance, so they're just going to kind of get one back at you with Ethiopia. Not sure how Tanzania feels about this, but I'm sure they will be okay. But next, we are going to see an incident occur. And this next part is heavily inspired by Ada's Pro. It's like the time thing. And it's going to happen right here. 10:24 a.m., Russian troops mobilize their forces. 10:26, troops are moved out from military bases, lining up their entire military right over here. 10:30, the Russian Empire is going to declare a state of emergency. 10:40, the old empire declares a state of emergency. 11 o'clock, the coalition is going to declare martial law. 11:30, the old empire's military is done mobilizing. Noon, the square team has finished their preparations of their military. 1:35 p.m., the coalition is going to collectively declare war on the old empire. So, now we can let the war commence. And since the coalition is in military combat, we are going to color them yellow, so it now represents a military alliance, sort of. And the first of the fighting, of course, is going to be over here in the old empire piece of territory on the Sea of Azov, and Russian paratroopers are just going to absolutely demolish this area. It was not too heavily, military defended, but right after this, Russia is going to move their forces down into Caucasia. But Caucasia has a little bit less support from the old empire this time, and that is because a lot of the old Imperial forces are focused in the Farmers' Union. This is because the Farmers' Union is evidently very not fond of Russia, and we're actually going to see another country joining in on the square team. That is going to be Poland. And we see another country joining the coalition, and that is going to be Poland. And with Poland joining the Square Alliance, they are going to have murder on their minds, as Poland has had a lot of their territory taken away from Russia. But once again, after this happens and Russia has a little bit of a proxy kind of to deal with over here in the west, the old empire is going to primarily focus their military over here in Caucasia, specifically by the Caspian Sea. But Indian troops have been lined up on the Persian Old Empyrean border for months. Indian and Tibetan forces have been here, and they've been working under the radar to try and figure out the Old Empire's defenses, and they are able to evade them, marching into Old Empyrean territory. And this is a line of major falter for the Old Empire. But going down here to Egypt, we are going to see them getting absolutely demolished by the Old Empire. Their capital isn't in the Nile Basin, so they should be jurisdictionally or legislatively okay. It is just the Old Empire is going to capture the Nile Basin and eventually move down the Nile. They're going to capture the entirety of the Gulf of Aqaba and their entire Mediterranean Sea coast. And this is going to be some of the finest work committed by the Old Empire. But Greece is going to make their moves next. They march into the previous Maroon Anatolian country, and they are going to take the entire territory of which it encompassed. And once again, Anatolia, big falter area for the Old Empire. But the Farmers Union is actually going to do quite well with a bulk of the Old Empire's outward forces. Outward forces kind of just meaning like country forces not in their country. And eventually we're going to see a familiar face pop up, and that is going to be Gold Crimea, and they are going to continue their, I guess, legacy over here in Crimea. And with their returnal, we see Russia is forced to take a little bit of their military out, but this division was heavily packed with troops, so it is going to hold off the Farmers Union and Crimea. But somehow Poland cannot be stopped, and people are starting to wonder, why is Poland so strong? Oh, yeah, that makes sense. The Dutch Empire is going to join in on the square team in an effort to try and bring Poland back to their original glory. And the reason they want to do this is because Russia is a big, stinky, imperialist country. So with Dutch troops now on the front line, they are going to absolutely start to obliterate the Russians. But they have now fully mobilized their forces, and they're going to continue their honorable campaign down here in Caucasia. And Caucasia is actually going to have a lot of success over here, kind of just whooping Russia's ass again. And this is evidently with less Old Empyrean support because, you know, they got to deal with the front line over here in Persia. But going back over here to Egypt, we see the Old Empire has continued successes taking the basin of the Nile, and basically the entirety of the north of Egypt has been officially captured. Naval skirmishes are going to take place between the Old Empire and the Gold Team, but Sudan is going to be where a bulk of the Old Empyrean forces trying to capture the Gold Team are, and these Sudanese forces are going to move out from the border into Ethiopia. Old Empyrean troops are now going to make a landing in Djibouti, and they're also going to capture this island right here, which helps them facilitate a second landing in the tip of Africa. And the front line over here in Ethiopia is just going splendid for the Old Empire. But going back over here to Crimea, the rebellion is actually going to gain a lot of support. I might be a nerd, but if I remember correctly, the entire reason Russia became a globalist superpower before World War III is because they aimed to unite all of the people. But these people do not want to be a part of that. They want to just be their own sovereign nation, and they are going to work together with the Old Empire and Farmers Union, evidently. They are going to officially break away from Russia. With this declaration, Poland is going to be able to take a lot of their troops and just smash them into Latvia. But at this point, Poland has been outreached very far, and they are going to have to stop a little bit. But this gives way for the Farmers Union to start an invade into more Russian territory. And you might be questioning, where is all of the Russian military? Shouldn't it be like here? Oh, that makes sense. The Russians are going to experience a little bit of rebellion inside their country, and that is for good reason. Their authoritarian rule is going to be very frowned upon in the international community, and these people are going to see their moment to rise up against Russia. At this point, continued successes are going to stall on the front line, but Caucasia is just going to continue to absolutely whoop Russia, to the point where full evacuation from the front line over here in Russia is going to have to be enacted. And the Caucasians are going to recapture the Old Empire's little area here, and they're going to move out from there, attempting to connect up with the Gold Team, which they do. And eventually, with revolutionary ideals starting to spread outwards from the border, now attempting to even topple Russian government and executing leaders. And with the rebellion actually making its way over here to the capital, Russia is going to have no choice but to exit the 4-point star coalition. But Russia's rebellion is not going to stop, as they link up with their area over here in the capital, and eventually Russia is going to sign ceasefires with every single country involved in their demise, and that is going to have Russia exit the war. But going back over here to Anatolia, the old empire has successfully stalled the front line, but that does come at a few costs. And that is going to be the ever-expanding front line over here in Persia. Persia, Tibet, and India are now working together to try and topple the old empire. But with all of their allies starting to falter, the odds may not be in their favor, as the gold team is starting to have their ass handed to them on a silver platter. And eventually the capital is going to be captured, and the gold team is going to sign a ceasefire with the square team. So now, with the 4-point star coalition losing a major ally down here in Ethiopia, they are going to have increased losses over here in Egypt, as now the old empire can focus a bigger bulk of their military here in Egypt, now sieging the capital and eventually capturing it. Sudan is also going to move their forces up north to try and help out the old empire, and this works very well, as Sudan creates a great diversion for the old empire to use. And like a lot of others over here in Africa, the campaign has now stopped. These guys really never used their military. Actually, they ended up trying to recapture territory that was in Egypt, and Egypt was kind of just like, yo, what the heck, man. So these guys are kind of just like, okay. But the 4-point star alliance is going to lose their entire flank over here in Africa. And now all the old empire has to worry about is west and east. West should not be too difficult, as the old empire is having a good time pushing back Greek forces. In World War II, it was evident that the old empire was able to do this, and now they're going to march straight up here to the Strait of Istanbul, and they're going to make a landing in Thrace. And eventually, Anatolia is going to be forced to fall into old Empyrean hands. But Greece is going to sign a ceasefire with the old empire, as a lot of their important naval assets are going to be absolutely demolished. And now, all they have to worry about is east. But east, a major development has occurred. A spearhead is now emerging. But this spearhead does give way for the old empire to enact increased successes over here near the Caspian Sea. They're actually going to start to do a very complex military maneuver, and you will see that in a second. But the entirety of the Indian, Tibetan, and Persian militaries are going to be launched into this front line, and they're all going to be bulked right here. Ah, crap. Persia, you might want to retreat. Oh, no, you don't want to? Oh, okay. I guess you can all just die. Alright, so basically the entire Indian, Tibetan, and Persian militaries have been encircled. And yeah. Now with the tides facing over in the old empire's favor, they are going to be able to navally bombard the southern coast of Persia, as well as capturing all of their Caspian Sea access. And eventually, the 4-point star alliance is going to be forced to surrender, and this includes its dissolvement. And with the dissolvement of the coalition, the square team has emerged victorious, and now we can take a look at the dividing up peace treaty. Alright, so the first article of this treaty is going to be the dissolvement of the 4-point star alliance. Jeez, I am out of it. And with the 4-point star alliance now being divided up, we can look at an official land gain kind of like map. So now we can take a look at that. Alright, and these are the lines that are going to be comprising our peace treaty. So I think we're going to take it country by country, starting over here in Poland. They are going to be gaining this territory from Russia. Farmers Union will be gaining this territory. Crimeans will be given independence. The Old Empire and Caucasia are going to get their land territory over here. And this new purple nation, which is kind of like the rebellion, is going to rebel away from Russia and break away. Next, down here in Anatolia, we see the Old Empire is going to take the entire peninsula, but not the islands. They're also going to take Thrace. They also take the northern areas of Egypt, and Sudan is going to get a lot of territory from this in Ethiopia and from Egypt. The Old Empire will get a small port colony over here in the tip of Africa, as well as a big chunk of territory from Persia. And I think that is about it. If you guys did enjoy this scenario, then please consider liking and subscribing. This video is definitely going to be a lot longer, like the recording is 40 minutes long. So I'm going to estimate that this video might be like 25 or 27 minutes long. But if you guys did enjoy it, then please consider liking and subscribing. It helps out the channel a ton. Remember, we are aiming for 100 subscribers by the end of the year. I really do think we can do it. And yeah, that is Augusto Mapping signing off.